Now I'm pleased to introduce today's guest moderator and manager of NCFP's new Community Foundations Initiative, Liz Sullivan, who will introduce today's topic and speakers.
Hi, thank you, Angie, and thank you all for joining us for the next 90 minutes. I'm Liz Sullivan, and I'm very excited to be your moderator for today's discussion, 10 Ways Philanthropic Families Work with Community Foundations. At NCFP, we know that family giving is a vibrant part of overall community philanthropy. Family members shape our individual values, experiences, and passions, which are then passed along to future philanthropists and civic leaders who in turn shape communities. Community foundations are a trusted resource and partner to philanthropic families. They are uniquely positioned to provide a range of expertise beyond asset management to lead and influence greater community change. This is why NCFP is pleased to host today's webinar on this topic. We're delighted that over 150 people registered for this program, and hopefully you're sharing the line with others in the room too. Just know that your participation underlines the value of these conversations, so thank you. So today we'll cover why and how family donors partner with community foundations, anchoring the discussion with 10 specific points that I hope will resonate with your work. Then we'll hear 2 terrific examples from the field of a family philanthropy working with and through a community foundation. And our intent is that you'll glean valuable insights from these national leaders. Finally, I do want to hear from all of you, and we have ample time at the end for Q&A with our group. So please do keep your questions coming throughout the presentations. Also, this webinar is the first public opportunity to introduce NCFP's new initiative, the Community Foundation's Family Philanthropy Network, which launched a few months ago thanks to the generous support of the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation and the Lilly Endowment. The Community Foundation's Family Philanthropy Network builds on NCFP's mission by focusing specifically on enhancing the practice and effectiveness of community foundations as strategic partners and trusted advisors to philanthropic families. Over the next 2 years, our intent is to help practitioners move towards standardized elements, tools, and procedures by exchanging knowledge, building capacity, and creating connections between community foundations and family philanthropists. The end goal, of course, is encouraging greater, better informed family philanthropy that makes a lasting impact in communities. I am honored to serve as a program manager for this initiative alongside an esteemed National Advisory Committee. In fact, 2 of today's speakers serve on this committee that is chaired by Alicia Phillip, President of the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta, and I know a few others from the committee are also listening in today. So this webinar offers you a preview of the kinds of topics we'll delve into with the Community Foundation's Family Philanthropy Network. And in the coming months, we'll release new resources and programs that you can access through your foundation's annual subscription to NCFP's Knowledge Center. And I'll share some more detail later on about 2 webinars to come in the months ahead. So if you like what you hear today, then I encourage you to stay connected to NCFP as we embark on this exciting journey. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers, and you've received links to their bios, which are also on the NCFP website, so I will be brief. First, we are delighted to have with us Mark Nethercutt, founder and principal of Nethercutt Philanthropy Advisors. From his consultancy and experience at the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan and at the Kresge Foundation, Mark is well informed to frame our discussion and outline 10 ways philanthropic families work with community foundations. Then we are honored to have 2 duos share their respective stories. First, from Atlanta is Lauren Amos, president of the Wish Foundation and a donor of the Greater Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. With Lauren is Audrey Jacobs, director of the Center for Family Philanthropy at the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. And then from Indiana, we are so grateful to have David Barrett, who is both chairman, president, and CEO of the Gene B. Glick Company, and president and CEO of the Glick Family Foundation and the Gene B. Glick Housing Foundation. In addition, David serves as an advisor to the Glick Fund at the Central Indiana Community Foundation. As such, David is joined in the room by Rob McPherson, Vice President for Development and Philanthropic Services at the Central Indiana Community Foundation. Mark, Lauren, Audrey, David, and Rob, thank you all for being so willing to share your experiences and insight with us and our audience today. And as I mentioned, Audrey and Rob are members of the advisory committee for NCFP's new initiative, so just special thanks to them for their leadership. Now that you've met us, we'd like to learn just a little bit more about our audience through a set of 3 poll questions. We'll launch those in a second, and please try and answer the questions as quickly as possible. If they don't apply to you, you can just skip the question. So the first question is a simple one. Just who is in the room? To give us a sense of the organization and roles on the call, please tell us if you are Community Foundation staff, Family Foundation trustee or donor, Family Foundation staff, either family member or non-family, Regional Association staff or board member, or professional advisor. So we will let you all reply and let us know where you're coming from. Give that a moment. So by and large, which we of course knew as the organizers for this, we have a great representation of Community Foundation staff today. And the rest of the audience are a mix of family donors and staff, advisors, and I'm very happy to see that we have some regional associations on the call as well. So thanks and welcome. The next question is for those of you who are from family foundations. So the poll is, are you currently working with a community foundation in some way? Just like to get an indication of what the relationship is like. So first option is yes, we have a donor-advised fund at a community foundation. Second is yes, we have a donor-advised fund at a community foundation and also engage with them on aspects of our governance and grant-making and other work. Yes, we engage with a community foundation but do not have a donor-advised fund. And then the last option is no, we currently do not have a relationship with a community foundation. So please select one if you are with a family foundation, and we'll give that a moment for folks to weigh in. Great. So it looks like we have a good distribution of those who have some level of engagement, but there actually are a handful who currently don't. So hopefully this webinar is a great entryway for you to understand some of the options and ways that community foundations can be part of your philanthropic strategy. So the third poll is for those community foundations that are in the audience, and to tell us a bit about your family philanthropy programs. So the 3 options are, we have a distinct program, services, and staff capacity. So that kind of tells us how far along you are in this work. Second option is we respond to donor requests as they arise. So a little bit, using existing resources and capacity. So a little bit more of an informal kind of program. And the third option is we are exploring ways to enhance our services. Maybe you've been hearing from some of your family donors and conducted some focus groups and you're in an exploratory phase. So please indicate which one best fits where you are in your work today. Okay, it looks like we've got a good proportion voted. So on the call, it looks like we have a good mix, about a third or so each of which we anticipated along the spectrum of where community foundations are in their work with family programs. Some have distinct activities and offerings. It looks like some have some more informal roles in place. And then others are looking to explore, which is great. So I hope that today helps to give you some ideas and thinking and shape your work moving forward. So we'll close out the polls. Thank you very much for weighing in on that. And let's kick things off by hearing from Mark Nethercutt about these different ways philanthropic families work with community foundations. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Mark.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's exciting to be here to talk with you about how families can work with community foundations. Liz was nice to give some background on me, and I just want to mention that I've been a trustee of my family foundation for 20 years now, a foundation my grandparents started 50 years ago. So in addition to serving at the Community Foundation here in Detroit, I've also served as a trustee of the Family Foundation, and that has given me the opportunities to see from all different sides the many benefits of these relationships between families and community foundations. So the National Centers have been very kind to ask me to quickly list the 10 ways that families can work with community foundations for their mutual benefit. And I think there may be a poll later that asks you which of these 10 are of greater interest to you, or that you feel most important, so you might want to keep track because you might be asked to vote a little later. So to get us started, we've got a couple different ways families can work with community foundations that focus on administration, and you can see that number 1 is reducing mundane paperwork. So working with a community foundation can reduce paperwork and the reporting associated with family philanthropy in a number of ways. For a family, this might include keeping track of the receipts for individual charitable gifts. Years ago, for example, I worked with a family that gave to 30 organizations every year in December, and the family had a donor advised fund at the local community foundation. The family would send a handwritten list of the organizations and the amounts every year as recommendations to the community foundation, which in turn awarded the grants out of the family's donor advised fund. In this example, the family didn't have to cut 30 checks and didn't have to keep track of 30 gift receipts. The community foundation did all the work. That was really a great opportunity for that family. For family foundations, in reducing mundane paperwork, a community foundation might process incoming applications for the family foundation or monitor grants to make sure that the funds were used for their intended purpose. So both of these examples show how the community foundation can be used to reduce paperwork and allow the family, or family foundation if you will, to focus on giving and grant-making strategy, which I think we probably all would agree are the most fulfilling aspects of the work we do in philanthropy. Number 2, governance structures and procedures. Just as a community foundation can be very helpful on administrative things, it can be very helpful on the governance side of things too. Community foundations can help organize and support board meetings for family foundations, for example, and they can convene members of a family for discussion about charitable giving. In short, the community foundation can act as a governance umbrella for the family to ensure that everything they do is done properly for reporting purposes and all. So next, we have a few ways that might fall under the category of how the community foundation can serve as a functional partner. Number 3, facilitating termination. As many of you may know, family foundations are thinking more and more these days about the benefits of limited life as opposed to perpetuity. Community foundations can not only help manage the process for a foundation with a sunset date, here. Furthermore, the family may choose to create a fund at the community foundation with those remaining assets as a way to continue the family's legacy as part of the community foundation. Number 4 has to do with anonymity. Turns out private foundations aren't quite as private as some people might like, and families and family foundations can often seek anonymity in their gifts, and this is difficult to achieve with a direct grant or a direct gift. So working with a community foundation, there are a number of ways to make sure that gifts made in this way, that the family or the family foundation is not identified as the source of the funds. The next topic is payout, number 5. As you know, family foundations must give away 5% of the value of their assets every year. Sometimes this can be tricky as the end of the year approaches, and many family foundations have used a fund at a community foundation to make a gift late in the year to help the foundation meet its required payout. You might think of this as a safety valve, and the family foundation that does this can later recommend a gift out of that fund when the timing seems appropriate. So this moves us on to number 6, tax advantages. Community foundations, as everyone knows, are public charities as opposed to private foundations, and so community foundations do not have to follow the stricter private foundation rules. For example, there are times when a gift to a public charity can offer a more favorable tax advantage than the same gift to a family foundation. So if this is of interest, consult your attorney. Number 7, here we go. Number 7 is working with community foundations can provide a number of more grant-making tools for a family. Because community foundations do not have to abide by the private foundation rules, they offer a number of attractive options to families for grant making. For example, community foundations can run scholarship programs much more easily than a family foundation can. Also, a family foundation may wish occasionally to make a one-time Now we turn to a few topics that focus on the community foundation as a local expert, and the first is access to local information and expertise. Community foundations are also a huge information resource. Nearly all community foundations are place-based grant makers. And a family thinking about making a gift, or a family foundation thinking about making a major grant initiative can often benefit significantly by talking with local community foundations. Community foundations typically have a program staff that is active in the community every day, working with nonprofits. And this on-the-ground knowledge is very hard to come by for families and for many family foundations. Number 9, local partners. Community foundations can also serve not just as the sources of information, but as also as strong partners. For example, for those families that make gifts in a number of cities, it may be difficult for a family to stay abreast of the issues and the organizations in each community. By working with the community foundation in each city, however, a family can have a trusted local partner to ensure that grants are more likely to be successful. And if you are interested in an issue in any community, the local community foundation can likely introduce you to other families and experts interested in the same issue. Finally, we come to number 10. Oh, what do you know? There's 11. So, number 10, collaboration and leverage. Working with community foundations can be a collaborative exercise where a gift from a family is matched or coordinated with grants from the community foundation. If both entities have common interests, and the community foundation has done a lot of due diligence, a family can significantly leverage its gifts by piggybacking on grants being made by the community foundation. And in the case of a larger, more ongoing issue, the family and the community foundation can organize an ongoing funders collaborative. There are a lot of really great examples of that in our field. And finally, number 11, educator on philanthropy and giving. Community foundations often have deep experience educating their donors and the public about charitable giving issues. Good community foundations recognize that their educational programs can be as impactful as their grant-making programs. Therefore, families can benefit significantly by participating in their local community foundation education programs. For example, most community foundations have youth programs that teach young adults about charitable giving, about philanthropy, and the nonprofit sector. Thanks very much, folks, for the opportunity to go over these 10, or was it 11?
That's great, Mark. Thank you so much. Yes, we get giving you a bonus gift of 11. Thanks for that comprehensive introduction. And there is a quiz on the other side. So we'd like to take the pulse of the audience on what you just heard and launch another poll to get your real-time take on what you think is most important. So the question is, in a community foundation's support of multi-generational family philanthropy, which of these advantages that you just heard are most important to you or the donor families you work with? We actually had to consolidate Mark's points into 10 options, and we will take them in 2 batches. So here's the first 5. Note that you can select more than one option. And if there are other services that you think community foundations are providing or can provide to donor families that have not been presented here, please let us know by writing them in the questions box. With our audience size, your input will give me and our speakers an indication of what's most valuable to you. This can not only help focus our remarks, but certainly inform future conversations and programming for the Community Foundation's Family Philanthropy Network. So you have your first set of choices here, which sort of focuses on the administration and back end. And by and large, there was some good input on the first around the administrative support, the back-end work that community foundations offer, especially, I would imagine, to those family foundations that don't have staff. The payout and governance structures are a second and third. So very good. So let's launch the second set around tax advantages, more grant-making tools, access to local information, expertise, and partners. That's the community knowledge piece. Collaboration and leverage, kind of community foundation as an anchor institution for place-based activities and issues. And then the educator on family philanthropy and giving. Within these 5 options, let us know, and you can vote more than once. And again, if there are other ideas or services and approaches that are not included in this list, please send them in as well. Great. So almost half of you replied that this community knowledge piece, the access to information, partners, connections, resources, NGOs is critical and most likely a differentiator. So thanks again for your real-time feedback on that, and continue to send us ideas and through the question box here. We're recording the questions as well, so if for some reason we can't get to them over the course of the program, please know that someone will get back to you, as we'd like to stay connected. So with that, let's turn to our foundation duos. To get us underway, I'll ask each pair to introduce themselves and briefly share a bit of background on their foundation and role, just so we have some of that context. Then each pair will go in more depth on how their 2 foundations work together. So first, let me invite Audrey and Lauren to just introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey Jacobs. I'm Director for the Center for Family Philanthropy at the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. I've been on staff at the foundation for the past 8 years. This will be my 9th year. A little bit about the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. The foundation was founded in 1951. Our current asset size is approximately $930 million. We have approximately 40 staff. We currently have about 650 donor-advised funds, 7 supporting organizations, a number of agency funds, which are like endowment funds, designated funds, and then about 30 scholarship funds. I work with a team of 10 people now in the department, which is called Philanthropic Services. And out of the 10 staff, 6 of us, our roles are specifically devoted to working with donors and their families. So we are philanthropic advisors and have other responsibilities, but our focus is around working with individual families and their funds. Lauren?
I'm Lauren Amos, and I also live in Atlanta. I'm an entrepreneur and a philanthropist. I have a fund at the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. I'm also the president of the Wish Foundation, and I'm a trustee of both the Soma and Daniel P. Amos Foundations.
Great. Thank you so much, Audrey and Lauren. Next, Rob and David, introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Liz. This is Rob McPherson. I'm the Vice President for Development and Philanthropic Services at the Central Indiana Community Foundation. We're located in Indianapolis. I've been with the foundation for 12 years. One of our affiliates, the Indianapolis Foundation, will be celebrating its 100th anniversary next year. We were created in 1916. We have about $720 million in assets, about 40 staff. Similar to Audrey, I have 10 staff members in the development and philanthropic services area, specifically about 3 full-time philanthropic services advisors and 2 part-time that work with families in particular. We have about 350 donor advised funds, 130 agency funds, 100 scholarship funds. And we were kind of thrown into the family philanthropy work back in 1998 when a very generous family with a very sizable charitable opportunity created one of the largest donor advised funds at its time in 1998 with a $90 million gift to us, and we quickly had to ramp up services in order to serve this 2-generation family in its current grant making, almost in a week to 10 days to begin to serve them. So, but it's been an awesome ride ever since, and the Glick family joined us very soon after that, and it's my privilege to work with my friend David Barrett and alongside him as a colleague.
Thank you, Rob. Hi, everyone. I'm David Barrett. I wear several different hats in both the for-profit world and the not-for-profit world. I serve as the chairman, president, and CEO of the Gene B. Glick Company. We are an apartment property management owner and developer here based in Indianapolis. We were founded in 1947. We have 20,000 apartment units in 10 states. We operate both in the conventional or market rate apartment space and the low income and affordable space. That's our for-profit venture. Taking my for-profit hat off on the not-for-profit side of things, I serve as the president and CEO and the vice chair of the Glick Family Foundation. We have assets in the $350 million range. Also, we have 2 donor advised funds, one at the Central Indiana Community Foundation, sizable about $85 million, and we have a donor advised fund at the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis in the $30 to $35 million range. We also have a not-for-profit housing foundation that was started as part of our founder, Gene Glick's estate plan. It's the Gene B. Glick Family Housing Foundation. The mission of that foundation is to provide and preserve quality, affordable housing throughout the United States. Currently, we have about 20 apartment properties totaling about 3,000 units and assets in excess of about $150 million. Also, I'm a proud advisor of the Glick Fund at Central Indiana Community Foundation with Rob.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rob and David, and welcome again. So let's turn back to Audrey and Lauren to hear more about their story and how they work together through the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. Audrey?
Sure, thanks, Liz. So I'm going to start by just telling you all a little bit about the Center for Family Philanthropy, which was launched in 2001 around the same time as the National Center for Family Philanthropy. And then I'm going to give you some examples of ways in which we work with a variety of families. And then I'm going to ask Lauren to share her story of working with the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. So again, just the Center for Family Philanthropy, what is it, where is it, how does it operate? We started it as a way to provide higher end services for our donors, as well as to encourage family philanthropy and involve the next generation in philanthropy. Excuse me, we provide a menu of services. When we initially started the center, donors whose funds were greater than $250,000 or donors who had a planned gift of $1 million or more were eligible to be part of the center. And they were able to access services such as reports, site visits, full grant-making services, succession planning, the opportunity to become deeply engaged in philanthropy. And we've been doing that over the years. We recently changed to expand and open up family services in the Center for Family Philanthropy to donors at all levels. They can opt in and pay an additional fee to receive that service. The services remain the same, though. It's really about bringing families together, providing transformational experiences through the foundation. And some of the ways that we do that with families is really at the very beginning of our relationship with them. And that is to try to have a facilitated family meeting. And I work with a team of staff, senior philanthropic advisors and new philanthropic advisors who've been doing this work for a while and working with many of the same families for many years. And that has made a real difference in the way in which we engage families. But we'll work through family meetings by bringing family members together to focus on what matters most and to make sure that all voices are heard, and really to set a baseline for engagement to ensure that family philanthropy and philanthropy is a fun experience, that it's rewarding, that it is inclusive as well. And so using a variety of tools, we'll have families develop mission statements and value statements, really guiding principles that they can use along the way. One of the ways in which we utilize the expertise of the entire foundation staff is through facilitated grant making. As Mark mentioned, our staff, our program staff, are out in the community all the time and have deep knowledge and expertise on issues and organizations that are important to our donors. And so we often bring that information to bear for our donors through the preparation of reports. We prepare customized reports for our donor families. And so if a donor family were interested in children and families in the Metro Atlanta region, we are able to generate a report that provides detailed information as well as professional expertise on that organization, so a professional opinion about that organization. It really helps our donors and our families be strategic in their grant making. And so we serve as a coach, as a GPS along a journey that can take years to really develop, but oftentimes it's about helping families think through what matters most. And so one example of a family in which we work with and grant making is really important is a supporting organization. For at least 10 years, the family has asked us to identify a docket, really present a docket of about 20 organizations twice a year, and they give away approximately $1 million during the course of the year to organizations focused on two areas, basic needs and the environment. And so for that family, working with that family means providing them with a docket, providing them with short reports. They rely on our professional opinion and support the majority of organizations that we present to them. We also have access to deep community knowledge on staff, and a lot of donors, that's what they really want from the Community Foundation. They want the opportunity to connect with strong nonprofit organizations in the community. They also want the opportunity sometimes to serve on boards, to serve on nonprofit boards. Next slide. Community collaboration. The majority of the family foundations in the Metro Atlanta region have donor advised funds, and they collaborate with us on a variety of community issues. We have expertise in areas such as the Arts Fund, strategic restructuring, education initiatives, and so we make it easy for donor families to learn about issues and connect with community leaders on issues. education is a major priority for a number of donors and families, and so we have an education funders network and provide donors the opportunity to participate in that way. Similarly, some of our initiatives, such as the Arts Fund, and you hear a little bit more about that later, donors have the opportunity to participate on that fund, learn about strong nonprofit organizations in the community. Some other ways in which we are working with families is through the next generation. For the past 8 or so years, we have helped families help their children, their younger children, between the ages of 9 and 16, think about philanthropy in a coordinated manner. And so we've developed a curriculum and have offered it on a yearly basis where young people come together, usually at a nonprofit organization during the summer, and they will utilize some resources from their parents' or grandparents' donor advice fund, and they will recommend grants to nonprofits of their choosing, but they will also learn about evaluating a nonprofit. They will learn about the nonprofit at which we host the event. They'll learn about what makes a strong nonprofit, what are the business aspects of a nonprofit organization, and also will provide some opportunity to make a collaborative group grant. There are some other foundations and family funds with which we work where transition is important. One example is a family with which we've worked for the past 12 years, and one of our senior philanthropic advisors has worked with the family for at least 10 of those 12 years. The family has a foundation in town, and it's a pretty strong and well-regarded family foundation. The family members, however, wanted to provide a way for the next generation to become involved, and so they established a donor advice fund as a way to really train that next generation. So if you think of the big foundation as being comprised of people who are maybe in the ages of 50 plus, and then the next generation of people in their 30s and 40s, they work through the donor advice fund, and our senior philanthropic advisor, Barrett Price, works closely with the president of the family foundation in identifying issues that the family is interested in, and then identifying organizations that the family in the next generation through the donor advice fund can support. So in many ways, the donor advice fund mirrors the family foundation, and it's used as a training ground. So those family members on the third gen level who are interested, who express leadership, demonstrate leadership, are then invited up to serve on the larger board. Recently, the family has focused on ways to engage the fourth generation, and those are young people under 21. And they have worked with nonprofit organizations, and the Family Foundation has matched those grants. And again, that's a way for the fourth generation to demonstrate leadership and then move up to participation on the third generation work, and then eventually to the large foundation. We're finding that many of our donors and donor families are thinking about succession and legacy. We have a number of donor advice funds where the matriarch or patriarch is getting older and is deciding that it's time to transfer management of the fund to the next generation, to an adult child or children. And so many of our family meetings are focused around helping parents talk to their kids and helping them become involved with the donor advice fund or the family foundation in a way that is meaningful. And some of the ways that that happens is through allocation of designated amounts of money through the fund, so that the next gen family member will recommend grants through the fund and talk to the parents about it, and eventually assume responsibility for management of the fund itself. And so for us at the Community Foundation, so much of our work with donors is really about working with families. The majority of the 640 donor advice funds, there are families involved. It's usually not just one person involved. And so, you know, we encounter the issues around family dynamics and culture, and really try to provide the space through family meetings and site visits as a way to bring families together and for families to really become stronger and enjoy philanthropy in the process. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Amos. Lauren.
Hi. Let's see. I come from a pretty successful and powerful family, and I think a lot of my life I've been trying to kind of find my own way and find my own path and make my own impact. And so I feel like I've been able to figure out a lot about myself through working with the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. So, you know, my mom growing up always told me that to whom much is given, much is expected. And so that's just really resonated with me. And so I wanted to give back to the community in which I lived in. And so I think she had a community foundation fund and maybe suggested it to me. I can't quite remember. And so then I set one up and got to know Audrey. And the community foundation has really helped me, you know, getting to know Atlanta and getting to know what I'm interested in. I mean, for the longest time, I wasn't quite sure, you know, if what my family had spent so much of their time giving to was something that I was interested in. So helped me figure out my interest areas, and then, you know, giving me access to organizations within Atlanta. So I started doing site visits and learning what makes a strong and effective organization. Audrey and the foundation taught me, you know, questions to ask and ways to evaluate each organization, which was really helpful. I also learned a significant amount about organizations from serving as a guest reviewer for the Metropolitan Arts Fund. It was a lot of fun. I'm very into the arts, and so it was totally overwhelming, totally intimidating, but extremely exciting. I was serving on the board with a lot of pretty big, you know, leaders within Atlanta, and so I was able to get to know people and find mentors and ask questions and go on site visits, and, you know, it made Atlanta smaller. It made it made the learning process more fun and more interesting, and you know, and then I was just able to make really great connections, which I love. So, and then you know, the foundation helped connect me to the High Museum of Art, which I'm on the now I'm on the board of, and they've just asked me to join the executive committee. And I would call Audrey and, you know, at the foundation to ask her guidance on how to be a good board member. I had no idea, and so she was able to, like, you know, email me, you know, sheets that would explain to me what a good board member did. And I've been able to use the foundation as a sounding board throughout this learning process of being a successful board member, which I've been so grateful for. I can't even tell you. I'm a trustee of several other foundations, two being family foundations that I don't believe utilize a community foundation like I do personally. And so I've been able to, you know, organizations, people submit for grants all the time, and I'm able to, you know, pick up the phone and call the community foundation and say, you know, run me a report on this organization. You know, I'm not sure, you know, how I feel about them. And so then they'll vet the organization or not vet the organization, and then I can go back to the table and I tell you, it builds my self-esteem being able to go back to the table with valuable information. So it makes me feel like I deserve a seat at that table. I'm young, and so I'm always looking for anything that builds my self-confidence, and the Community Foundation has totally helped me do that. So, and then I have another pretty recent example, which in which I've used the foundation. So, because, you know, I own a sneaker boutique, and so I get like sneakers that guys wait out in front of the store for a week to buy. So we get a lot of the music industry. It's a crazy world, right? It's a totally crazy world, but it's really cool. And so I'm surrounded by people of all walks of life, and because of my own life experiences and my work, I'm really passionate about inclusion, you know. And so I wanted to support an organization that helps LGBTQ homeless teens find placement and support. And so I found an organization online, it's my own research, and then I just don't trust my own, you know, the research that I find. learning curve, a journey, and I really don't think I could do this without the involvement of a community foundation. I mean, I'm just a huge advocate, and I push it on when I go and serve as a trustee for my family's foundations. I constantly am bringing up the importance of it. So, so that's about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren and Audrey. We did receive a couple of questions that I will hold until we get to the other side of Rob and David's remarks as well. But please continue to send them in to us. And thanks so much. So, Rob and David, now it's your turn. The floor is yours to share some of the specifics about the many ways your foundations collaborate.
Thanks, Liz. I appreciate it. This is Rob talking. Yeah, if you could go, yeah, that's great, because these are our inspirations and the matriarch and patriarch of the family, and instilled values of generosity and inclusion and giving back and fairness and a whole bunch of other things, not only in their family, but they were very connected with our community foundation and many others out in the community, the Jewish community here in particular as well, and their legacy lives on. And I think that's a little bit of an introduction of how I think David and I would like to spend the next 10 minutes or so. We've been working together officially for about 8 years, and I'd like to kind of go through 3 phases kind of our relationship. The beginning of the partnership 8 years ago, when literally David will tell the story of how Gene and Marilyn's philanthropy happened, and almost literally had to turn on a dime in a day when it was turned over to the next generation, next 2 generations actually, and our involvement there. And then we'll talk about, you know, after a few years of working together, how we needed to go a little deeper and be a little bit more strategic. And then now how we're really doing some collective impact and moving the needle on some very specific, very large issues and agendas in the community together. And it's not just our money that we're working with, it's a lot of other influence and so on. So I'm going to let David start and tell a little story about his grandparents-in-law and how we got started together.
Well, thanks, Rob. You know, as I was listening to Lauren speak, she talked about the great appreciation she has for the role a community foundation is playing with her. And I just want to say I certainly feel the same way. You know, Rob and I joke frequently that it's a mutual admiration society between us, because we really have had a wonderful working relationship for the last 8 years. Actually, as Rob mentioned, the relationship goes back long before that. We were a traditional checkbook foundation for our founders, for Gene and Marilyn. One of the funny stories that we both like to tell is how Gene used to, for a man of his means, love to take people to lunch at a local cafeteria. Very, very simple and straightforward. They would engage in the traditional pitch where over some cafeteria food, they would explain why Gene should part with some of his money, and more often than not, Gene was happy to have lunch with people, but also was happy to tell them no. It really was a traditional checkbook foundation, and there was very little planning by our founders, both on the for-profit side and on the not-for-profit side. So here I come along 8 years ago, and I'm asked to make the transition, again, both of the for-profit business and the not-for-profit enterprise, our family foundation and the housing foundation, and then the entities that I had mentioned earlier. It was a tremendous honor for me to be asked to do this, but it was also an incredibly daunting responsibility to take assets of this particular size, a company that had been around since 1947, a foundation that had been established in 1982, and say, okay, well, go ahead and find a roadmap and let's move this thing forward. So I turned immediately to our friends and partners at CICF, who have absolutely been tremendous partners. I have no doubt that we would not be where we are today, and we would have not made the transition from a good old-fashioned checkbook foundation to a very sophisticated and strategic foundation today, were it not for the guidance and the advice and, frankly, the strategic planning offered to us by CICF. And really the first thing, and I think the turning point in our relationship, was a meeting we had 8 years ago with Rob and with his team at CICF, where we sat down and said, hey, we really need to think about how we can be more strategic about our giving and about our philanthropy, how we can put our dollars to the highest and best use. And we had a day-long retreat with CICF where they led us through a very meaningful strategic planning process. And one of the things that we found in that process that was very gratifying and frankly not all that surprising is that our philosophy, the second generation and the third generation's philosophy on philanthropy, was very similar to our founders. And on top of that, we also found it was very similar to the mission that Central Indiana Community Foundation has. So it really has been a very symbiotic relationship, and there hasn't been a lot of contortionism to try and align our goals. So that's really, I think that was a turning point in our relationship and really has gotten us to where we are today, Rob.
Yeah, and I would say just for my Community Foundation colleagues, staff members that are listening, we employed a very, I think, traditional, or Tracy Gary, I think, helped set this up, and a number of other practitioners in our field. We apply a lot, like Audrey talks about, a lot of we call it a values, interest, purpose exercise, our VIP exercise. And really for the Glick family, that meeting 8 years ago that we had everybody there, the 4 daughters of the second generation, a couple third generation, and a couple key leadership at the for-profit Gene B. Glick companies, we had them sit around a room and discuss their values as a family and as a group, individually and collectively, and that truly was a unifying and very motivating. I still remember that day as well as David does. It was a very rewarding day, and beginning with values with the family, I think, is incredibly important, and would encourage my colleagues to do all of that. Out of that strategic discussion, if you can go to the next slide, we obviously did then help develop a mission statement for the family, and kind of a grant making process that was very basic, because they were truly starting out as a brand new foundation, technically, because it had been Gene writing checks and Gene and Marilyn writing checks, that now they're actually an organized entity. And so we had a mission statement, had a procedure, had a couple grant rounds, developed a grant application process, and we helped them just with a very straightforward grant program. Then I think they quickly got it, and they were great quick studies, and we moved to a more strategic aspect. And as they saw the requests coming into them and them being reactive in their grant making, they wanted to take a little bit more of an initiative. And I think trust grew, and as David said, we were wonderful partners from the outset. Then we began to look at the many other entities that they had, not just this one fund at the foundation. So Angie, if you could move to the next slide. I'll let David talk about in a little more detail the 4 aspects of their philanthropies and how we kind of work with them across all 4 categories.
So if you look at our life cycle, 8 years ago we made the transition that Rob and I just mentioned from checkbook foundation to more strategic foundation. And I would say over the last year or so, we've really tried to go to the next level and move not just from the Glick Family Foundation or from our donor advised fund and perhaps a more traditional model of grant making to really an overarching philanthropic strategy for all of the things that we can do. And I think earlier in the conversation I heard Audrey use the word fun, and it was really neat to hear that, because frankly we look at this from a very business-like and professional perspective. But Rob, honestly, it's been a lot of fun over the last 8 years, and what's really fun right now is, as you can see in this slide, looking at the different areas that we're involved in, from traditional philanthropy, our family foundation, and our donor advised funds, where, in my opinion, we're really firing on all cylinders in a very robust and active grant making process, thanks to CICF. We've really expanded what we do on the affordable housing side of things. Our business is housing, so it was only natural that as part of our founder's estate plan and frankly part of our strategic plan, that we look at affordable housing from a very philanthropic perspective as well. Corporate social responsibility is something that has always been a hallmark of our company, and we've just decided in the last few years to rededicate ourselves to that and frankly to formalize our CSR efforts through GLIC Cares and GLIC Gives, our volunteer program, and a matching gift program. And then from a community leadership perspective, I know Rob would like to spend a few minutes talking about TeenWorks, which is a program, a work and education youth program that we've had for now, I think, 32 or 33 years, that has been expanded greatly. And you see on the slide there the Far East Side Success Initiative. We've taken a very holistic and strategic approach to an area here in Indianapolis that is in desperate need of a lift up. And it's really our first strategic venture outside of our traditional grant making that we're right in the middle of working with CICF on.
So if you can go to the next slide, please, Angie. So the three areas that we were going to talk about, we've kind of hit on the first two, the generational transfer and family engagement work, how we've deepened that work over, from after the first 2 or 3 years, and then the next 2 or 3 years we were just being a little bit more strategic, doing not all responsive grant making with them, just we were being a little bit more intentional, a couple RFPs, honed down the interest areas that they had into a more refined, targeted categories within each interest area. So that was kind of the first, I'd say, 6-7 years of the relationship. And now we are really moved into kind of driving collective impact projects. I will say some of this is, and David didn't kind of give the whole time frame, and there's significant assets in all of the GLIC philanthropies. They ballooned suddenly when Mr. Glick passed away 2 years ago now, David. So they went from giving away a couple $1 million a year to looking at having to now give away, especially from their private family foundation, kind of as Mark had talked about with that required 5% payout. There was hundreds of millions of dollars that went into that private family foundation. So they were looking at giving away a couple $1 million a year to suddenly $10 million, $12 million. And as awesome as that sounds, it's kind of overwhelming, isn't it,
yeah,
David?
No question. So, things that certainly the scale has changed in terms of what we're trying to do. And in one respect, it is a daunting challenge. In another respect, it's an incredible opportunity and, frankly, will allow us to continue to do all the different things you saw on that last slide, from traditional grant making to more strategic grant making, and frankly trying to spearhead collective impact type of projects like the Far East Side project.
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is, as I said, not just using or recommending to the Glick family on how to use their grant making dollars, but looking at all of the assets that they have. What's that? What was that? Sorry about that. So we're looking at beyond the financial capital that not only we have or the Glick family has, but what's the influence capital, what are their property assets, and we're looking at, and we had our first kind of 2-day strategic planning retreat this last winter with the family to really look at how can we use this increase in grant making, but also the assets that we have to really improve the lives of a very specific population in a geographic area on our Near East side here in Indianapolis. Happens to have one of the housing units that David talked about that does have some of the low-income housing there. But we're partnering with the Indianapolis public school system and changing one of the elementary schools there to be more of an innovation school project. We're working with the Boys and Girls Club. We're working with the community center on that east side, job development programming, almost promised neighborhood when it comes to that. And we actually did a lot of research with the family, went on a couple site visits to North Carolina, to Texas, to New York, to Harlem Children's Zone. So we were able to do a whole bunch of collaborative things together and brainstorm with them. We led a little bit, they led a little bit, we listened, we did research, and it's been a fascinating 18 months really in getting ready for this, and the family is so excited about not only the dollar investment, but the lives that are going to change and the generations of lives that are going to change on the Near East side.
I guess the only other point that I would add is that there's no question that it's tremendously rewarding for the family to be able to continue our founder's legacy and to be able to watch our philanthropic efforts evolved to where it is today. There's no question in my mind we would not have been able to do this were it not for Rob and his team at CICF. You know, I would also tell you that we're talking about substantive grant making and wise use of capital, but you know, the skill sets of our organizations match so well that some of the points that were made earlier today about organizational and structural issues, you know, we rely heavily on CICF for their staffing, for their expertise, for a lot of the back office and grant making work that frankly we don't have the staff to handle. So again, it's been a very symbiotic relationship. We've been able to focus on the assets that we have, dollars and influence and ideas, and have been able to use CICF for their strengths, which certainly ideas as well, but also staffing, support, knowledge of the community, and their knowledge of the not-for-profit world here in central Indiana. So it really has been a relationship where we've been able to go from strength to strength and capitalizing on the strengths of both organizations. It's been a tremendous ride, and I look forward to continuing that.
And I would say that I think the Glick family was, you know, I don't know if they were directly influenced by what Warren Buffett did years ago, but David and his family did not want to create an internal infrastructure for this private family foundation and devote some financial resources and resources, honestly, away from their for-profit business. And they were very honest with us to say, we don't want to do that. We want to rely on your staff of 40 rather than to create our own staff of 4, 5, 6, or whatever that they could do. If you go to the next slide, please, Angie, we'll go quickly through this. I mean, they're very proud and they're an incredibly humble family, but you'll see that not just over the last few years, but since with the generosity of Gene and Marilyn Glick going back decades, $93 million has been poured mostly into our community. They've done some other regions throughout the country, but it's been incredible. And then the next slide, our first project together in this collective impact project was actually something that we led on at CICF. And this was when Gene and Marilyn were still with us and alive, but we were creating an 8-mile urban bicycle and pedestrian walkway in downtown Indianapolis. It's a $65 million project, our first collective impact project. And when we talked to Gene and Marilyn about it, they wanted it to be literally one of their main legacies here in Indianapolis. They were the lead donor at $15 million. The entire family has gotten involved in this, especially after Gene and Marilyn's passing. David is very integral with this. Our board member, Mary Ann Glick, is interested in this. And then if you go to the next slide, Angie, just it's things like this that when we see results and outcomes that all of us feel great. So this is the exact same location in downtown Indianapolis before and after the cultural trail. You'll see that bike rider there with that kind of patterned bike walk with those candlestick lights. That's the cultural trail. And there's been over half $500 million of economic investment on the cultural trail, so you can see some of those buildings pop up. But this is a very proud Glick CICF partnership that kind of kicked off our collective impact work together now that we're moving on to that Near East Side project. And I think that's how we'll end that.
Very good. Thank you so much, Rob and David, for this really robust and comprehensive overview. It's a great, it's a great positive relationship. I think both of these examples just demonstrate the sort of symbiotic nature of these duos. So I wanted to wrap up the sort of formal presentation by doing a very quick round the horn to have each of you just say a word about any advice that you would share with those on the call, maybe naming an obstacle or challenge you faced in your partnership together and how you've managed through them. But for those who are, as you saw from the earlier poll, sort of in the early phases of doing this work, what do they need to know? And let me start first with back to Rob and David, and then we'll go with Audrey and Lauren and Mark. I'd love for you to chime in as well. So, Rob?
Sure. Thanks, Liz. I would say that, again, to my Community Foundation colleagues out there, that this is all about relationships, understanding the family and being incredibly candid about that internally, and knowing when to lead, knowing when to follow, being upfront about that with the family members. Is this a time where you want us to take control and push you? Do you want us to step back and listen? accepting who they are, all of those sort of things, and having expectations up front at all times, so no one's guessing, no one's assuming. That's really, really, really important. And we all know, just with our own experience, the different dynamics within a family, and the more training we could get in the Community Foundation world in family dynamics and facilitation training, I think that's been our internal strength, as when we can how we work best with the families that we work with. Right, David and I were trying to think of a challenge in our 8 years together, and we do have such great relationship. We can't think of anything necessarily negative. So he was going to talk a little bit about a challenge of demand, supply and demand, kind of.
Well, Rob's right. I mean, frankly, the only real challenge we've had is that we've grown so quickly, both financially and asset-wise, and substantively and programmatically. Our biggest challenge was going to CICF and saying, hey, we need more of your time. We need more resources. And we wanted to do that in a respectful way that certainly respected their staffing and the nature of this partnership. And frankly, we were able to work out a very creative arrangement where one of their staff members, Ryan Brady, is able to now split his time between CICF and our Family Foundation, and frankly, all of our philanthropies. We had wondered, both for Ryan and both for CICF and our organizations, how that would work. And actually, it's worked out well in large part due to Ryan and the fact that he's such a great and capable advisor and representative. So we had a challenge of finding ways to kind of increase the interactivity between the organizations, and we were able to do it.
Wonderful, thank you. And Audrey and Lauren, any advice to share?
I agree with everything that Rob said. This is Audrey. Would add that working with families is staff intensive, and
yeah.
So at community foundations, there's a lot of work that's done that's transactional, but really building deep relationships and getting families to come together to be philanthropic together takes time, and there may be stumbling blocks along the way. Or a family that comes to you initially thinking that they know exactly what they want to do, their values may remain the same, but their interests and the way in which they want to engage family members may change over time. And so I think one of the things that we've had the great advantage of at the Community Foundation is that we've had philanthropic advisors who have worked with families for almost a decade, and in some cases more than a decade. And I think that has made the difference. But for community foundations with less staff, it's a challenge because you want to spend the time with the family. You want to help them develop their interests and hone in on their passions and take them on site visits and manage grant cycles, but you may not have the capacity to do it.
I'm not
Laura,
sure.
anything you'd like to add?
I think it's been, everyone else has said such great things. I just agree.
Okay, well, thank you. We've had a couple of questions come in, and we'll turn to Q&A in a moment. But the issue was sort of the ratio of staff capacity to this high-touch approach is certainly of interest. And very quickly, Audrey and Rob, how many families do you engage in this kind of way with the, I think you both mentioned 10 or so staff that you have, just very quickly?
So over the years, it's varied, and I would say it's a small percentage in terms of this real high touch level, to about 15%. We, for many years, for 10 years, operated with really 4 people who were relationship folks in terms of philanthropic advisors, and 2 of us really didn't have as large a portfolio as 2 of our philanthropic advisors, but our board recognized the importance of the ability to really develop deeper relationships with our donors. And so over the course of the past year, we added 2 additional staff members. So the ratio of donors to staff is about approximately 150 donor advised funds per philanthropic advisor. It was a lot more in the past. And in terms of family meetings, there are some funds and some supporting organizations where the family engagement is regular, twice a year for one supporting organization. But for others, it's really an annual meeting. The reports are the donors who are requesting reports, about 15 to 20%.
Great.
I have about, I have 3 full-time philanthropic advisors on staff. They will go a certain level of depth with anybody in their portfolio that they believe have, significant potential or are at a tier 1 kind of quote size for this deep service work. They're all trained in family dynamics and they're all trained in facilitation, so they kind of know and work on their own of how deep to go. We probably have 10. I know we have 10 families that we work with at a much deeper level. The Glicks and one other one, the one that began in 1998 that I said at the very beginning, where we have almost one full-time staff doing that, or at least almost probably a 3/4 time staff. One of them, actually, we do have an outside consultant that is the primary relationship manager there, so I'd encourage my colleagues to think of creative ways. It doesn't have to be a full-time staff member all the time, but bringing somebody on to help manage a family in particular, that might be 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, but it's still then trained and part of your team. I think is a great way of doing this. I was able to just hire literally 2 weeks ago another philanthropic services advisor who will kind of work with those 10 major families, but in a supportive kind of quarterback way with the lead relationship manager with each of those families. So we're being a little bit more responsive and a little bit more kind of administrative program staff help. So we're adding a team member to those relationship managers for those top 10 foundations.
Great, thank you. So we have some additional questions as well that I wanted to make sure we can touch upon, and those in the audience, continue to send them in. And again, if we can't address them in the minutes that we have left, we do want to get back to you, and it is being recorded. But first, Angie and I would just quickly like to go over a few additional NCFP programs that are coming up. As I mentioned earlier, I'm really pleased to announce a special webinar series for community foundations called Spark Sessions, and these are 60-minute peer learning programs, much similar to what we're doing right now, that will feature your community foundation peers, designed to exchange ideas, advice, and practices. There are 2 that are already set, so please save the date to join us. These sessions, these Spark sessions, are open to foundations that are part of our Community Foundation Family Philanthropy Network. So please do learn more by emailing me at community@ncfp.org. Angie?
Great, thanks, Liz. And we want to make sure that you all know about our groundbreaking Trends in Family Philanthropy research. We hope that you will all be a part of this exciting research by completing this fun and thought-provoking survey on identity, leadership, practice, and the future of family philanthropy. Your voice and experiences are vital to this important benchmarking study for the field, and we thank you in advance for your sharing your perspectives. In addition to our webinars geared specifically for community foundations, we'll continue our monthly webinar series on Thursday, July 9th, when we'll present fellowship programs honoring your family's legacy alongside communities for a lasting impact. This will feature discussion on the benefits and challenges of creating a fellowship program and an in-depth look into the process of launching one for your family's foundation to honor the legacy of a loved one and to collaborate with leaders in your community. As always, just go to ncfp.org and log in to our Knowledge Center today to register.
So we have a few minutes left to continue to facilitate some audience questions. And there's a reminder to submit your questions using that box on the right side of your screen. And Audrey, I'd like to direct this one to you. You had mentioned, the role of community knowledge as a critical aspect of how you engage and work with donors. There have been some questions on some of the kind of tactical, operational back end of how you manage that, how you, what tools and software and resources and methods you use to collect that community knowledge and turn them into reports for donors.
Sure. Our program staff prepares the reports, and they could be organizational assessments, organization reports, and the tools are really information that is obtained through our competitive grant-making programs, our initiatives. Our unrestricted fund is called our Common Good Fund. So we are able to take some knowledge of nonprofits from that information, but we also will go out and visit the nonprofit and have a series of questions that we ask to generate a customized report. And the reports themselves are formatted, but they are done individually by our program officers and program associates.
Good, thank you for that. Next, both Rob and Audrey talked about the value of having those initial family meetings, these facilitated dialogues to get that baseline for what engagement looks like. If you could both share a little bit more, and Rob, if you could go first, on some of the tools and even what an agenda would look like. What are some of the main things that you cover? You talked about the VIP. Can you share a little bit more about that? And then as a follow-up question, maybe you can include that in that, what are some of the ways that you have trained your staff around facilitation and family dynamics? So you can answer that and see if Audrey can add to with her perspective as well.
Okay. The way that we would approach a very first kind of family meeting, and we'll actually do this with one individual, a couple, or a multi-generational family. We have a very specified agenda, and we kind of pull agenda topics as appropriate for the family where they are. But typically, the storytelling is great, and so kind of as an icebreaker and for us to get a sense as to who this family is and kind of the history of it, we'll do what we call a philanthropic autobiography, and we'll ask them a question like, who is the most generous person you remember from your childhood? Or what is your first memory of money as a kid, or giving money away, or receiving something very generous from somebody else in your neighborhood as a kid? And we'll really learn where did some of this come from the family. Then we do go into this values, interest, purpose exercise, and again, Tracy Gary's book, Inspired Philanthropy, I know a lot of us use or refer to. You know, setting aside past grant making or giving, or what some of their interest areas are, we actually talk about and give them you know, 40 values words. You know, do you believe, and you know, your personal principles and the way you live your life? Is it generosity? Is it equality? Is it understanding? Is it you know, parity or justice or whatever? And we talk about values and why those are important to us, maybe where they came from. Then we bring in the whole interest area. What do you want to change? K through 12 education, dogs and cats, GLBT, as Lauren had mentioned before, symphony orchestras, the arts, environment, all of those sort of things. And then creating this mission purpose statement in matching the values and the interests to say, because I believe in equality and justice and fairness, and I want to affect the education and the homeless, we strive to, you know, speak for the unspoken and, you know, speak for the voiceless and blah, blah, blah. So we'll craft a mission statement kind of in that sense. I make every single one of my staff members go through that with their spouse or their family, and we kind of do peer learning and collective, you know, internal training that way. We read a lot, again, the Tracy Gary stuff, and I have new staff members shadow when that's appropriate. I've learned the most about family dynamics from Kellen Gersick in his book, Generations of Giving, I think. Audrey might know exactly what that's called. And Audrey was on a Philanthropic Services Initiative, TPI, team with me a number of years ago, and Kellen was instrumental in us helping us understand family dynamics. And actually with an in-law in the room, David being the grandson-in-law of Gina Marilyn Glick, just really the dynamics of who enters the family, who's part of the family, how's the family defined. All of that's really important, and understanding those, I think, going into it is really critical. Audrey, what would you say?
So I would add to that, Rob, with the resources available to us through NCFP's Knowledge Center in terms of sample mission statements for families and some tools there. I'd also add training through 2164. We do use 2164's values cards and Picture Your Legacy cards, and our staff has gone through that training. Some of our staff has done training, and it was a while ago with Charlie Collier and Kathy Wiseman, but the book Wealth in Families I think is still very helpful and has a method for family meetings. Tracy Gary's materials as well. In terms of family meetings, I also encourage you to talk to the fund advisor first and have an in-depth meeting about what you hope to accomplish, and ideally to interview other family members before the family meeting takes place to limit surprises and to get a real sense of who's going to be in the room and what the objectives are. Our staff has also done facilitation training because we found that that really is important.
Wonderful. Thank you both for sharing those resources and approaches. And you know, through this initiative, we want to create the platform to distribute those and make them available through the NCFP Knowledge Center, and giving some more specific avenues for community foundations to access them. So thank you for that. We are really close to the end of our time, so I just wanted to formally close out before turning over to Angie, and to thank our panelists, Mark and Audrey and Lauren, Rob and David, and to the audience as well for joining us for this program. Angie?
Great, thank you, and thanks for all the great questions. I did want to give Mark a chance for any parting comments or observations that he'd like to offer about this presentation and what he's heard. Mark?
Well, gosh, thanks, Angie. What a great webinar. I just loved hearing the stories from Atlanta and in Indianapolis. I just thought that was really valuable stuff. Speaking to the families on the line, I'd encourage you to get started right away. Get started early. This is really great stuff. The earlier you get started, there'll be more learning and more joy and impact along the way. And now that you've got some encouragement, I'd encourage you to get right at it, because people never say, I wish I'd started later. So that's my suggestion.
Great, thank you so much. And as a reminder for those of you with access to NCFP's Online Knowledge Center, if you'd like to share today's discussion with your board or colleagues, both a webinar recording and a written transcript and slides will be posted on the Knowledge Center next week. Please also keep an eye out for our short, simple participant survey, which will appear immediately following the webinar. And thank you again for your participation, the panelists for their great information and wealth of knowledge, and our guest moderator, Liz. And we look forward to talking with you next month.